Joslin. Good morning, buddy. Welcome to the BoardRoom podcast. It's good to see you this morning.
Thank you, Scott. Good to see you. Thanks for waking me up after a quick nap.
No worries. I got some questions for you.
Uh-oh.
You need a coffee or anything? Are you good to go?
Yeah, I had my tea before I paddled this morning, so I'm caffeined up.
Where did you paddle?
We have the ocean, and then we're on a barrier island here in Melbourne Beach, and on the other side of the island is the Indian River. So today the wind was out of the southeast, which we have a little 2-foot swell running and a lot of chop from the southeast wind. So I went in the Indian River. So it's a bit calmer.
Cool.
And got 6 miles under my belt, hour and a half. And sometimes that's just the heat. Today it was just bloody hot. The sun was baking and it drained me a lot.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you, brother, for paddling 6-7 miles. That's incredible. Have you seen the movie Oppenheimer?
I have not. It's on my calendar. I need to do it.
You probably saw Barbie though, right?
No, didn't do Barbie. I did see Tom Cruise and did that in IMAX.
That was a cool flick. That was fun.
Yeah, IMAX. See, I'm waiting. There's only 2 showings a day on the one IMAX theater here for Oppenheimer, so maybe this weekend.
Yeah. Well, let's bring you back to the beginning. When did you start surfing?
When did I start surfing? The first time I ever surfed was in Virginia Beach in 1962. My cousin lived up on somewhere around 70th Street, something I can't remember, but it was near Fort Story on the north end of Virginia Beach. And he had a collection of surfboards. He'd been surfing since the 30s.
Wow.
And he was a big real estate guy in Virginia Beach, oceanfront house. And I paddled in and stood up on my first wave. That was great. But I actually got into surfing in 1965. We had hurricane, which hurricane was it? 1965, there was a hurricane. I lived in North Palm Beach, Florida, and the hurricane drove a 450-foot freighter called the Amaryllis aground on Singer Island. They were aiming to come in Palm Beach Inlet, and they missed it by a mile and plowed straight into the beach, right on top of a reef. And that grounding of that freighter created the surf culture in Palm Beach County. Wow,
that's interesting. So you had sandbars rights and lefts coming off of this freighter, I imagine, or was there no?
Yeah, it had a bit of an angle coming from the southeast or east southeast, which created ultimately, before they did, cut it up and drag and took it out a mile outside where they made an artificial reef, but it was there from 65 to 69. And at the end of it, there was a cove because of the way the sand was moving. There was lefts 300 or 400 yards.
Wow.
On the right conditions, when the bars connected and everything. Yeah, it was phenomenal.
That was a sad day when that thing got taken away. How quickly after it was removed did everything kind of just go back to not very good?
Yeah, I went away to college, so I wasn't around for the next 2 years. And when I came back, all of our focus was at Palm Beach Inlet. The north side of the inlet had a pumping station that transferred the sand from the north side of Palm Beach Inlet to the south side, because the south side would be depleted of sand as the way the currents carried the sand. And that was our spot, Pump House. And Pump House broke on wind swells. So we have the Bahama
That's still a
Bank.
wave today. Isn't that a wave to this day?
Yes, it's famous because during the big, huge north swells, it's a veritable pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. It's a crazy left-hand dredger.
It never really did like that. Back then, we would always paddle across the inlet or drive over and park at Reef Road, which is the other famous place. But the sandbar really, there was pictures taken of it. Nobody rode it back in the 80s or 70s, actually, mid 70s. Nobody was riding it. There was no jet skis at that point in time. And we were all just surfing Reef Road, but you could see it. They took photos of it.
Would you just see spit, like just mean laughs that were spitting and just wow.
Just going, wow. But we were getting great waves at Reef Road. So it really wasn't something we were concerned about. But the beauty of Pump House is that we have the Bahama Bank straight east of Palm Beach County, and that kills any open ocean swells. So the value of Pump House is if there was a southeast wind blowing 15, 20 miles an hour, we get these like short period 4 or 5 second wind swell that you could surf at Pump House.
And protected from that wind, or was that wind out of water?
When the current was running out the inlet, it would be clean on the inside. So an outgoing tide, Pump House would be clean with the swell coming through.
Yeah. And how many guys were surfing Pump House or Reef Road or any?
We had a pretty good surf population, even at that point in time in the 70s, 80s. When the Amaryllis was
Florida, right? I mean, we're talking South Florida here.
We're South Florida. We're at the northern end of South Florida. So I left Palm Beach County to move to Brevard County, Melbourne Beach, which is about 100 miles north, because we're out of the shadow of the Bahama Bank. Right. So we get a southeast open ocean swell, but down there it wasn't. But there is a considerable amount of surfers. It was a popular thing to do, and Pump House could get really crowded.
Why do you think surfing was popular on the East Coast in the 60s? Like, what is your, I mean, we know the obvious reasons, like movies. And
well, yeah, I mean, in the summer, that changed my life without a doubt, because we all.
Did it ruin your life?
No, it's made my life. Unless sitting here talking to you means my life is ruined. No, but we all went to a drive-in movie theater to see Endless Summer.
Yeah.
And we were just, that's all we could think about. So we got bit by the bug thanks to Endless Summer and Bruce Brown. And I guess now we have to thank, what's the guy's name from Hobie? He just got inducted in the Walk of Fame yesterday. Dick Metz.
Oh yeah, Metz.
Yeah. So the true history of the Endless Summer starts with Dick Metz and his travels in South Africa in the early 60s to set up Bruce Brown and his creation of the Endless Summer, the story that wasn't quite true.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Metz has got, I mean, it's just so interesting, right? That behind the scenes of Endless Summer was this guy who'd been there before and told Bruce Brown all about it. Pretty interesting. Now you've been, you're a member of the East Coast Surfing Hall of Fame. You've been, I don't want to mischaracterize this, but I'm going to say you've been a master of ceremonies for surfing contests, for surfing events for decades. And is that a proper characterization? Correct.
I actually started doing skateboard events in the 70s. I was the MC for the first Hester Pro Bowl series, which was the beginning of vertical skating competition. So Henry Hester was a downhill racer, not a bowl rider. he put his efforts into bringing bull riding to the forefront of the sport. And I was there and was able to pick up a microphone when they didn't have anybody that was really knew what they were doing. And not that I knew what I was doing, but it's kind of been a natural talent for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's interesting. Henry Haster, a guy known for slalom skating, sort of pushing the envelope regarding the ball and pool skating.
Correct. Absolutely. He did a great service to skateboarding by hosting that series. It changed the whole direction of what skating was all about, because they'd been doing races out at La Costa and the downhill thing. They had a good following, and they actually went across the country to Colorado and Ohio and did races. But the bowl thing was just emerging, because it took a while for the skate parks to come along with correctly produced bowls.
Transition, yeah.
There were a lot of abhorrences out there that were trying to be bowls, but once they got the construction methods down and you could get smooth transitions and true vert, it changed the whole direction of skating.
That's really cool. I'm stoked to hear that about Henry. I didn't know that. I didn't know that about Henry, and I don't follow skate history that well. I'm sure it's a well-known thing, but that's cool, because I'm a big fan of Henry Hester. He's a great guy, super good guy.
Superhuman. He's a map surfer and
Well, I've got it from a pretty good source. You know what he's doing now is foiling.
Yeah, well, most people are foiling.
Yeah.
If you have the time and the physical capability, foiling is the next level.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Look, we know that the East Coast's greatest surfer is Kelly Slater. But the East Coast is home to some of the most interesting surfers that I've come across. The East Coast seems to breed just a little bit more wildness, I guess. And maybe I'm mischaracterizing it. Maybe I'm throwing a generalization, a blanket on all of the East Coast surfers, but I'm going to go down a list of guys, and I would love it if you could provide me with some insight, provide the listeners with an anecdote or a story or just some insight about these guys. So the first one is Jeff Crawford. What can you tell me about Jeff Crawford that I don't already know?
Crawdaddy is the nickname, and I changed it from Crawdaddy to Crappy Pappy, because he could be pretty mean out in the lineup. It was Jeff's inlet, so to speak. But Jeff was a phenomenal surfer. He could surf regular foot or goofy foot. He was naturally a goofy foot first, but he switched stance without a problem. When during the 70s twin fin era, when he was learning to do 360s, it was like he was doing it both ways, switch foot and natural and regular foot. He was phenomenal talent. And then when he went to Hawaii and proved himself as a barrel rider of the highest order, winning the Pipe Masters, his reputation was set in stone.
Yeah. And I did something last night. I went on Matt Warshaw's Encyclopedia of Surfing and watched video of the 1977 Florida Pro, which Jeff Crawford won. He beat Rabbit Bartholomew. I'm sure you remember it. And man, oh man, is Jeff Crawford surfing smooth, and he's doing what you just suggested. He's going, and mid off the lip, he's switching stance at the top of the off the lip and going to regular foot and cutting back right. And he won the event. Jeff Crawford, just amazing.
Yeah, and that was a great longboard maneuver. The guys that could switch stance on longboards, that was a patented maneuver, and he took it to shortboards. Nobody else was doing it. So yeah, he made it, and he was smooth. He was a style master, still is. He's still surfing and quite the style master.
Is he still out at the inlet?
No, he has a house, a home in Hawaii on the North Shore, right in front. Right in front of, or I'm not sure what his beachfront is, but he's right in there amongst pipeline and off the wall. He's
Yeah.
right there.
Cool. What about this East Coast surfing champion, Gary Proper?
Proper was, God rest his soul, he's passed. He was an arrogant son bitch, but he had footwork and maneuvers just like what we were talking about with what Jeff did on a shortboard. Proper did stuff on longboards that was mind-numbing. When you would see footage, when I first saw the footage of him in Puerto Rico, it absolutely blew my mind. The guy could surf like nobody's business. He was the real deal. He never could prove himself in Hawaii. He was not a big wave guy. He was a small wave maestro. And he surfed with absolute style and radicalness, his drop knee action, and he could switch foot as well. And his nose riding and getting heels was second to none. He was an incredible force to be reckoned with. And then he turns out his Hobie model sold more longboards than anybody else.
You know, I heard an interesting story about Gary, that he was here. He was actually going up to LA to have a new logo made for his Hobie Gary Proper model. And he was hanging out in Dana Point with Mickey Munoz and somebody else. I forget who else. And Bruce Brown. And a truck pulls up. Steve McQueen gets out. He's doing filming for the On Any Sunday, the motorcycle movie that Bruce Brown put out. Steve McQueen they chit chat in the parking lot. They're all talking. Of course, Gary Proper's jaws dropped. You can't believe Steve McQueen's this guy's a living legend. And somehow or another, Steve McQueen finds out that Gary Proper needs a ride up to Laguna to do something with the logo. And so he goes, hey, I'll give you a ride. So Gary Proper gets in Steve McQueen's truck, just him and Steve, and they drive up to Laguna Beach. And in the process, Gary gets cold. And Steve McQueen gives him a leather jacket, says, here, just keep it. You know, apparently they bonded on not having fathers or something like that. And Steve McQueen took a liking to Gary and gave him his leather jacket.
There you go.
Yeah, have you ever heard that one?
I have not.
Yeah. How about Mike Tabling?
Tabling was the first emerging talent that proved himself in California. He put the East Coast on the map in California. He went out and won the events he entered. And he was another flawless surfer. He wasn't quite as snappy and wild as Gary was, but he was smooth and precise. And then his transition into the shortboard era, the Michael Tabling twin fins, and how he surfed that was second to none from the East Coast. So he was my first idol on the East Coast. When I learned that he was what he did in California, I just said, and then he's the best. He's the first one to let California know people on the East Coast could really surf, that they paid attention to.
He did a good job of marketing himself too, and in that I know that I want to say, did Weber surfboards have a tabling model?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if it was a tabling model or he was just in all the ads. They had several different models as they transitioned from long to short. He was on a Weber Performer on the longboard phase of it. It wasn't a tabling model. Perhaps they had one as they transitioned, but
as I recall, I think it might have been that he was riding the Ski, which was like the Nat Young model Weber, and I think Tabling did a lot of.
Yeah, I don't think he actually had his name as a model on a Weber.
I was lucky enough to meet his son recently. I was on the East Coast a couple of weeks ago and met his son. Super good guy, and very much reminded me of Mike, who I just thought Mike was just a cool guy, just a really approachable human.
Yeah, no, he was great. He would call me. He'd find out I was in Southern California. He'd call me up and say, "You got to come down to Bob, man. I've got this place, and he would invite any East Coaster that he could get a hold of that he knew was in California. And I was one of them. And unfortunately, I never was able to take him up on the offer because he had a condo right in front of a right-hand point break. And I never took him up on the offer, but I was completely stoked that he would invite me. So I felt I had arrived.
That's sweet. Yeah, your childhood, not your childhood, but you're sort of your hero guy is like going,
Yeah.
"Hey, let's go."
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Well, I got to surf with him. I cemented my relationship with tabling in I would have to say it was like 84. We ended up surfing at the Rodanthe Pier on an absolute epic storm swell.
Yeah.
And it was barrels. We surfed all day. I just showed up and he was there with Bruce Veluzzi and we just surfed together. And that's how I got to know Mike Tabling, and he respected me because of my ability to surf at that point in time. So that was our connection from then on.
Cool. He knew. He's like, Hunter's got chops. Now you mentioned Bruce Veluzzi, who I don't know much about Bruce. I've done a deep dive on some East Coast surfers. And Bruce Veluzzi seems perhaps one of the most interesting, and maybe one that whose character who needs to be more excavated, needs to be told. What do you know about?
Yeah, and I'm not one to enlighten you further on that. He is a Cocoa Beach boy, and this was before my time. He passed away before I came up here and got into the mix.
Yeah.
So I know very little about Bruce Veluzzi other than his talent was respected by everybody. They figured if he'd have lived, he would have been one of the greatest ever from the East Coast. He had tremendous skill in all conditions. He rode big waves and a standout wherever he went and surfed. But that I have no personal knowledge of Bruce Veluzzi.
Yeah. Well, I know he was a writer. He was a proficient writer. He wrote for the magazines, and like a lot of the surfers back in the mid 70s, you know, you surfed in the competitions and you also wrote the article about the competitions.
Yeah, he was multi-talented in that direction, and we lost him way too early.
You know, I found out that Bruce Veluzzi is the person that named Backdoor Pipeline. He named that wave Backdoor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's news to me.
Yeah, well, that's what we do here. You know, we break news.
or find news that's broken.
Probably more. That's probably more what we do. Well, here's one of the most interesting guys, certainly sort of a brainiac, and that's Greg Lohr. Tell me a little bit about Greg Lohr.
Greg was just the all-around style master. Wherever he went and wherever he surfed, he turned heads. He was kind of, you would think of him on the lines of Wayne Lynch.
Yeah.
And that kind of approach to his surfing. And
Yeah.
he was just and still is to this day, he's just a laid back guy.
Yeah.
There is no any inkling of an ego. He's just a phenomenal surfer.
And it sort of an engineering background. This Greg, obviously, with resin research, has done so much regarding breakthroughs in surf technology, epoxy resins. I mean, this guy understands fabrics and epoxy resins. And I just wonder, I guess I should just interview Greg. I'd love to interview Greg, actually. He's such a great guy. And you're right, he's kind of got like a Southern charm to him.
Yeah, he lives in Phoenix, Arizona, runs his resin sales out of there. He has a warehouse here that's run by a guy named Sammy Barker. But Greg was ahead of his time in surfboard manufacturing materials, going to the epoxy route way before anybody else, and was environmentally conscious before anybody else. And his design, he was the one that pioneered concave bottoms on surfboards, because everybody else was doing rolled V's and V bottoms and stuff. And he put the concave from nose to tail to in the tail. I mean, he was the one that Greg Weber is very appreciative of the direction that Greg was taking with concave bottoms way back in the early 80s. And
Oh, that's interesting. That's cool to know. And I know that, he was involved on some level with what's the guy from Firewire, Australia guy?
Nev,
No, not Nev. There's another guy that,
the other guy from Western Australia that's actually started Firewire.
yeah, BB. It's two B's in his name. I can't remember.
Yeah, Bert.
Bert Berger.
Yep. Bert was a classic, or still is. They broke the mold on that boy.
Yeah. And he and Greg Lord were teaming up together and coming up with a whole new way to build a surfboard.
Yeah, well, I did not know that, but I know both of those guys, and yeah, they would be two peas in a pod, without a doubt.
Yeah, I ran into both of them at Cardiff surfing in the early 2000s, and I remember they pulled up, paddled out, and pretty much took over. And they did it with a smile and like, "How you doing?" It wasn't like there was any.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, now we're talking about Greg Lord a little bit here, and of course he's a a game changer in a bunch of different ways. But perhaps this guy is the most. I don't know. Is this the wildest East Coast surfer ever? And or maybe I'm mischaracterizing. Help me out here. Dick Catree. I don't know much about Dick Catree, but I sense that this guy was a wild man. That this guy was probably part Pope, part I don't know, crazy man.
He was a carny.
Yeah, there you go.
No, Catree was the godfather of East Coast surfing. He created a reputation for himself and carried along the East Coast with charging big waves with Greg Knoll and those guys back in the early 60s. He was it, and he brought that energy and knowledge and those relationships to the East Coast and started the Surfboards Hawaii team, and then that morphed into the Hobie team, and they were the force to be reckoned with up and down the East Coast. They traveled extensively and won everywhere they went. Every now and again they get beat, and Catree was a terrible loser. He didn't like to be beaten at all, and but he was.
How did that manifest itself? What would he do to?
He would go up and rant at the judges. He would try, if he was running an event, he would change the rules. He was notorious for.
He ran events and surfed as a competitor in the events he ran.
Or more often, well, he was older than everybody. So if there was a division for his age group, he would surf. But more often it was his guys. And if they got beat in the heat, then he would go and raise all holy hell about it. If he was running the event and somehow it necessitated a rule change, he would do that. He was a character of characters. But the energy put into events and creating a forward momentum for competitive surfing, and then on a pro level, he was always the guy. Yeah, he had a very colorful presence within the whole surfing world, from surfboard manufacture to surfing events to media coverage. He was in the thick of it all the time.
He strikes me as sort of a larger than life character.
Yeah, he was that's the way he carried himself. He was a larger than life guy. He liked that. Catree's Italian, and he had a little bit of mafioso type in him.
Yeah.
And he carried that wherever he went. And yeah, I got to know him over many years of emceeing events for him, and it was always it got warmer and warmer year to year. At first, it was like, you're working for me, do this, do that. And then by the end of it, he let me come in and do what I do, and didn't have anything to say because I did it well, and he was quite happy with it.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, all of these random figures, not random, but super important figures from the East Coast, he strikes me as somebody that maybe we could do a feature-length film on his life. I mean, there's some dark conflict there, right? There's some stuff there. There's some, I mean, let's be real, like, we're talking, the East Coast was sort of a hub for nefarious activities in the late 70s, early 80s. And I'm sure that, and by the way, I'm not one to, you know, we all have dark pasts, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that I'm some sort of hero here, but I find him fascinating on a bunch of different levels. What do you think of a feature film on the life of Dick Catree? Is that something that is there enough conflict there to create a good story?
Yeah, if you could get all the information from it. I guess Murph is still alive. He can spin stories until he falls asleep at night. Murph is a deep well of stories. If you get Murph started, it's nonstop. You can't get a word in edgewise, and it's all interesting stuff. And he goes on and on. So, and
you speak of Jack Murphy. So for the listeners, Jack Murphy, give us a little bit of insight about Jack, and then go back to
Murph the Surf. Jack and Catree started surfing, and their involvement in competitions and everything down in Miami Beach, and they were both they would go around to the different hotels. They were lifeguards and they'd get work at different places, but they were a diving team. They would do a diving show at the hotels and get to know all the women. They were both notorious womanizers, and that morphed into Murph was breaking into hotel rooms and stealing jewelry and stuff. And I don't know what level of involvement Dick had in that. That was more Murph's story. But yeah, Jack Murphy went on to go to New York and steal the Star. What was it called? The Star of India sapphire, the biggest sapphire in the world. Broke into a museum and stole it, and they caught him, I don't know, 3 weeks, a couple months later. But he was a notorious character, and then he got wrapped up in a murder investigation and was charged with murder and went to prison, and is pretty well known that he found the Lord.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And as he proceeded to become the chaplain in the prison and live a righteous life, they let him get out. And to this day, he's a preacher of the good word.
Wow. So maybe that's the guy we need to do. I bet they have tried to do a feature film.
No, they have done a feature film.
I thought, yeah. What was it called? What was it about?
I don't know what the title was. It wasn't Murph the Surf. It was something else. But
it's
yeah,
story of the stealing of the
story of the stealing of that. Yeah, it touched on his life, but more revolved around the nefarious character that pulled that off.
Yeah. Huh. I'm sure one of our listeners knows. I wonder if that's a good movie. I wonder if it was made well.
I saw it. It wasn't bad. It was interesting, but then I had knowledge and of what it was all about. So it was interesting from that standpoint. So
yeah,
I'm sure that Warsaw has probably got some write-up about it, and has a click-through access on the Encyclopedia of Surfing.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to take it, and I know I have done a little bit of a dive on him. He's an interesting guy, and he sounds like he'd be an interesting podcast.
Oh my God, you wouldn't get, you would want to cut him off, but you wouldn't want to cut him off because all the stories he's telling are interesting. But sometimes he drags the story on a little too much and you got to move on. But yeah, you blow your mind to talk to Murph. He's quite an interesting character, to say the least.
Wow.
Alive and kicking, so dig him up.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. So you could get a hold of Catrie's wife. She would know how to get a hold of Murph.
Yeah.
Or Yerkes. Bill Yerkes would know how to find Murph.
Also Bill Yerkes.
Also Bill.
See what I mean? The East Coast has got a bunch of characters. Like we've got Mickey Dora, you know what I mean? You guys have got so many friggin' crazy characters. And I'm wondering why it is. First of all, am I misrepresenting that? Are there in fact just the same amount of characters on the West Coast as there are on the East Coast? Maybe I'm too close to them, so
Absolutely. Well, I mean, the East Coast is a much longer coastline than California and the West Coast. We got to include Oregon and Washington State, I guess. But you know, I got specific characters from the different specific regions, from the Northeast up in New Hampshire and the guys up there, and then moving down into the character of all characters on the East Coast, Sid, Brucey, and then you get out onto Montauk and Long Island, and the characters all in there with the New York accent and all of that. The surf shop owners down close to the city, out in that portion of Long Island, and then New Jersey, which should be a country all into itself, because everybody from New Jersey, you know, talk about a separate entity. New Jersey is, each city has a whole slew of characters in the entire coastline, because the summertime beach business, surf business of every little beach town from the entire length of the Jersey Shore is surf shops in every one of those little towns, and stories and longevity. I mean, some of those surf shops have been there since the 60s. Yeah. And then you get on down into Maryland, Delaware, you know, there's a little bit in Delaware, but Ocean City, Maryland has a good history and some very serious characters from there. And then Virginia Beach, which is the centralized area of the East Coast, both north and south. Virginia Beach is right in the middle. And the host of characters that came out of Virginia Beach, and then the Outer Banks, Nags Head, to down to Hatteras, that has a whole history of its own. A little bit later, it got developed later than all the other ones, because it was there wasn't much population there. And we opened a surf shop in Nags Head in 1975, and the wintertime residency of the Outer Banks was less than 1,000 people. And now the Outer Banks, the population is 100,000 plus all year round. It's crazy. But so, and then you go south of there to Wrightsville, and then south of Wright, and there's some great characters there. Roy Turner, coming from that area, and Reggie Barnes, and then down to Myrtle Beach, and the guys from Myrtle Beach, and then Pawleys Island, and McKevlin's in South Carolina, and then a little pocket in Georgia, and then you got the whole Florida coast from Jacksonville, each town, Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Daytona, New Smyrna. Yeah. And you know, New Smyrna has emerged since the demise of Sebastian Inlet. The best surf on the Florida coast, especially, I mean, year round it's good, but summertime when it's flat everywhere, New Smyrna breaks and is very, very well placed with surfers and sharks. There's probably as many sharks in the lineup as there are surfers at any given day, but it picks up swell. It's like a little magnet right there. Yeah. So, you know, everybody would comment about first peak at Sebastian Inlet, but when the demise of that went, then New Smyrna has come out to the forefront as the most consistent place in summertime surf. And
tell me a little bit about why Sebastian's no longer.
Well, the great blunders of the Army Corps of Engineer going to change the design of the jetty because there was sand washing through and filling up the inside of the jetty into the inlet.
Right.
And so you don't want to fill the inlet up with sand. So they decided they would change the flow of water through the inlet, and they changed the inlet and the nature of the shape of it and curved it out further and to the south, and allowed the wave to wash through rather than to rebound. So the way they had the jetty design, it created the first peak, which was actually a refraction off of the jetty across the wave, and made this world-class barreling peak. And the Army Corps of Engineers summarily destroyed it. And there's plenty of surf at Sebastian Inlet, but the quality is, you can't write home about it.
Yeah. You mentioned Sid Abruzzi. Take me back up north a little bit. I believe he has a feature film, a biography, a documentary of some sort.
Coming out this month.
Yeah, he's having a big celebration this summer. So tell me about Sid and what you know about his documentary and so forth.
Well, they came and shot footage with me. I was honored to be included in it. They came to my house, and then they came to the INDO board warehouse, and we shot some stuff there. I mean, my getting to know Sid went back to a wave pool contest in Mount Saint Sever, Canada, which is outside of Montreal. And there'll be a little segment in that film about that story, but I have a poster from that event on the wall in my office, and just classic Sid story. And I don't want to get into that whole story, but Sid Abruzzi is the mayor of Newport, Rhode Island. On the surf side, there's the mayors in a lot of surf towns of surfers, and Sid is that.
Tell me about the story that you don't want to tell. Give me what happened in
Well, this guy that worked for the wave pool. It was the wave pool at Dorney Park in Pennsylvania, where the first World Inland Surf Championships was held. I was the MC, and all the boys came, all the Australians and Sean and Californians, and everybody came out for that. And the company that built that wave pool for Dorney Park also sold a design and built a pool at this Mount Saint Sever, which is a ski resort outside of Montreal, about an hour and a half or so. And I met the promoter. I don't know if he was an owner. I don't think he was, but anyway, at Dorney Park, I met this Canadian guy, and he says, "Hey, I want to do a contest up in our wave pool. Would you come up and be the MC?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And so he and I went up with Tom Dugan from Eastern Surf Magazine and Charlie Kuhn, and Charlie ended up winning the event. But when we got there, there was this group of characters from Newport, and they had told this guy that they were international surf champions. And it was all made up by Sid. And so when we met these guys, and this promoter had told us, "Oh yeah, these guys, they're surf champions from all over Europe and South Africa and stuff." It was fucking Sid. And I can't remember the guy. I'll try to remember it, but the guy that made Flight snowboards and skateboards and surfboards, Flight, Flite.
Yeah.
And he was the one that he and Sid put this group of nefarious characters together to come and lend this international professional story to the event so that the media and this guy promoting the event would have a more extending circumstances to what was going on in the wave pool.
Right. This is fascinating.
Yeah. So that's how I met Sid.
Sid created an international flavor. All of these guys from Newport, Rhode Island.
Yeah. But then another time after, I have to remember the timeline, but at Surf Expo, and one morning before Surf Expo, I was driving toward the expo, and on the side of the road is Sid with his thumb out hitchhiking. It was 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And he looked like he just it was an all-nighter, which it was.
Yeah.
But the story was that he got arrested for peeing on the side of a building in downtown Orlando, because there was an event at one of the clubs or a music venue in the center of downtown Orlando, which is about 30 minutes away from where Surf Expo is. So at 7:30 in the morning, here Sid is, just, his long hair, and he was a mess. They let him out of the drunk tank, and he was hitchhiking back to Surf Expo. So I gave him a ride, and he told me the story, and he was still half drunk anyway. But it was classic Sid. And Sid, his alter ego, and I don't know, Sid was enough of a name for that, was a notorious partier, alcoholic, pedal to the metal all the time. And when he decided to quit drinking and sober up and everything, he's such an amazing guy. He is just a beautiful character. Found the love of his life and got married, and she's balanced him out, and he's I love him to death. He's just such a phenomenal human being. But back then it was like, oh, fucking Sid, let's go the other way.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, I'm so excited to see his documentary. I don't know enough about Sid. I know he's absolutely legendary, and I'm looking forward to finding out and learning more about him through this film. And I should reach out. I've had some contact with him, and I should reach out and do a podcast.
Oh, it would be, I don't know who'd be better, Murph the Surf or Sid, because his stories are all up there in the history of surfing in Rhode Island, and he's a huge part of all of that. One of the things you'll see in the film is underneath of his house, it was a basement that was kind of a dirt floor basement, not a built out basement, but that's where his band would play, and they would have these parties all night long underneath of his house in this somewhat of a cave, if you will, because it was a dirt floor.
Yeah.
And the stories that he's got about what was going on during that era.
It sounds like.
It was, I mean, he was like Sid Vicious. I mean, he was a punk rock madman, and they lived that lifestyle. And he was a skater. I mean, what he did for skateboarding, he had an indoor skate park with a huge half pipe ramp. It was incredible. I went and skated that with him in between the X Games and Gravity Games. I think it was the Gravity Games. I was working up in Providence, Rhode Island. I
actually went to those Gravity Games myself.
Yeah, I was the head judge of this street luge and downhill skateboarding.
That was crazy, wasn't it? That was
so
cool.
Yeah. It was NBC's answer to the X Games.
Exactly.
And they had a lot of money behind it, and it was a great production.
Yeah, they sent us out. I was working at Surfer Magazine at the time, and they sent us out to cover it. And yeah, I remember it was a lot of fun. Yeah,
it was. There's good stories from that one as well.
I got to get a hold of Sid too and do some insight.
Sid is great now that he's sober and all. He can
Yeah.
you reference the stories and actually talk about them without without going off the deep end.
Well, you are a member of the East Coast Surfing Hall of Fame, but you also are the announcer, sort of an organizer on some level. I know you're involved in it, and this year, the East Coast Surfing Hall of Fame, it's each September at Surf Expo is when you bring these people into the hall. What's the right word for it? No? Okay, back up. Tell me what's going on.
That in September, we announce who the inductees are.
I see.
So the voting is done, it officially starts in February or March. And they close the vote, or not the voting, the nomination process. So if you know somebody you think should be in the East Coast Surfing Hall of Fame, write up a nomination, kind of a bio of who you're nominating and why they should be in that. And those are submitted over that period from, say, February, March until May, beginning of June, something like that. And then it goes to a select committee who reviews all of those nominations and picks 10 of the new nominations.
Right.
So those 10 join the list of who was left over from the previous year. So there's names in perpetuity once that you get to the nomination list. So they take 10 or 11 out each year, and so they replace those 10 or 11 every 2 years. So say they get nominations for 50 people, only 10 or 11 of those go into the perpetuity list.
Right.
And then the select committee, they send ballots out to, I think there's 36 people, and we vote on it, and they compile the votes, and then those inductees, the list is already done. I've already got the list. I'm doing my editing of the bios that they give to me, so that I do the voiceover on the video that Mitch Kaufman puts together, a video that we will show in September.
Okay, and now I get it.
Yeah,
The
and
new
then
nominees, we're going to keep a wrap on that until September when they're announced. Right now, it's button up our lips.
right, the new, not nominees, the new inductees. So we want to make a distinction. Inductees are ones that are past the nomination process, and they are going into the
Okay, and in September, you announce the inductees. And when do you induct them officially?
in Surf Expo January.
Oh, gosh, I hope I can. That's right. And I've been to that a few times. It's been good. I know I was there when I think Pat Mulhern accepted for his father, and I want to say maybe Shea Lopez or somebody. I think Greg Mungle was there getting inducted. So that was fun. I really enjoyed it. And it seems like the East Coast tribe is a lot closer than the West Coast tribe. Again, this is just all my own, imagination from what I see. It seems like that, I don't know, there's just, is that a misnomer, you think?
Well, because it's well known, or should be well known enough within the industry, of course, but general knowledge is that in the heyday of surfing, which comes and goes, but the population of the East Coast, the manufacturers, the Quicksilvers and Billabongs and the surfboard companies, 60% or better of their business is on the East Coast. So they do, the East Coast supports these, keeps them in business.
Yeah.
And certainly the surfboard companies back in the 60s, they sold all their boards on the East Coast. Every single manufacturer wanted a part of the East Coast market because we were sucking up surfboards beyond anybody's compare. But the board riders thing that's going on now on both coasts. I mean, it's the same deal going on California. All the shops that have board riders teams in the different areas, from the Cayucas and on up to Santa Cruz and further north. that's a similar thing. I mean, we just have a longer coastline and a more diverse group, because New Jersey people are so different than North Carolina people, are different from Montauk and Long Island people. It's a whole different ethnicity, if you will, within the surfing world of each of those locations. And the West Coast, you don't get that kind of diversification. You don't hear about the characterization of people from Oregon, surfers in Oregon, to be like the surfers in Montauk.
Right. Yeah,
So,
there's a homogenation here on the West Coast almost. We're all kind of the same, more or
yeah,
less.
homogenous West Coast stuff, because you're jaded because you get so much more surf than we do.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's true. And one of the things that's fascinating is what you mentioned, and I don't think people realize it, but in the 60s, like Greg Knoll knew Dick Catree, the Hobie guys knew Dick Catree, like they were just moving tons of surfboards. And as you know, I do a vintage surfboard auction, California Gold Surf Auction. There are so many gems of old boards on the East Coast, and a lot of them are in these surf shops. Guys that own these shops have owned them forever, have bought land in the 60s. There was no like pricing out of the surf shops because they bought them so cheap. And they're sitting on collections of old boards from Casters to Hobies to Knolls that are just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I haven't seen collections that can rival Birds or or what's the guy's name that fixes the Ding King down in San Diego? Roper. I mean, Joe Roper's collection. He doesn't do what he does that Bird does. I mean, you can go into Birds and look at all of that, and you go into Roper's factory and they're just piles.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the likes of that, though. I do know that there are lots of collectors here on the East Coast, without a doubt. And yeah, there's hidden gems in all the surf shops. The surf shops with great longevity, most of them have collections from people turning them in, or discovering it in an attic and say, you want to buy this board, $25? Hell yeah. Which does the same thing in California. I mean, they show up out in California the same way. But again, the length of the coastline, just there's so much that was sold out here. There's hidden gems all over the place.
Real quick, tell me about because I know Dick Catree and Greg Knoll I think they were kind of tight. How is it that Dick Catree, and I'm sure I'm butchering his last name, he got involved with the Hobie team? Was there, to your knowledge, was there some politics or some infighting about who Dick was going to represent regarding the surfboard manufacturer? Was it going to be Greg Knoll, or it was Hobie, or how did that
I know that Dick started with Surfboards Hawaii.
Yeah.
And that he changed over to Hobie. And I don't know the politics or the circumstance of that. I'm sure Balsa Bill could weigh in on that. But that was a huge transition. Surfboards Hawaii was a good brand, and as I remember as a 15, 16-year-old, that Surfboards Hawaii was a beautiful surfboard, but Hobie was the one that just his team took over. But it started with Surfboards Hawaii. How that morphed, I don't know, but certainly something with Catree. Now, Catree's relationship with Greg Knoll, that was welded in their surfing, the big waves of the North Shore and Makaha. But I don't know if there was a surfboard deal that went on with Catree and Greg Knoll.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. Well, look, you're going to be announcing the new inductees in September, and then they will be inducted in January. Both happen at Surf Expo, which I'm a huge fan of in Orlando. So that's going to be fun. And we've got Sid's thing to look forward to, and you're still paddling. This is all good. It's been it's been great catching up with you, Hunter. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks, Scott. And it's, I've known you for a long time. We keep crossing paths here. That meeting in Mexico was epic.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Well,
But,
look, have a great day. And again, I appreciate you coming on. We'll
Yeah.
talk soon.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you so much.